Two young Americans, Emily and Jack, had always felt a profound connection to animals that went far deeper than most people could understand. Their small apartment in the city, perched on the fourth floor of a weathered brick building with squeaky stairs that groaned under every footstep and creaking balconies that swayed gently in the wind, was cluttered with evidence of their shared obsession. Books on wildlife were stacked in precarious towers against every available wall, volumes on African ecosystems, behavioral studies of big cats, documentaries about conservation efforts. Photographs of African landscapes adorned their walls. The Serengeti at sunset, elephants crossing dusty plains, acacia trees silhouetted against blood-orange skies. And then there were the animals themselves, the occasional rescued stray that had wandered into their lives. Cats with broken legs, birds with damaged wings, all nursed back to health with tender care before being released back into the world. Hey everyone, before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button if you love animals, subscribe for more amazing wildlife stories, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an adventure. Also, comment below and tell us where are you watching from today. We'd love to hear from you. Emily's love for animals had started as a child, spending countless afternoons in her suburban backyard, tending to injured birds that had fallen from their nests or collided with windows. She would fashion makeshift shelters from shoeboxes, feeding them with eyedroppers, whispering encouragements as they slowly regained their strength. Her mother had once asked her why she cared so much about creatures that couldn't even thank her, and Emily had looked up with tears in her young eyes and said, "They don't need to thank me. I can see it in their eyes when they get better." Jack, more methodical and analytical by nature, had spent hours of his adolescence reading about predator behavior and ecology, fascinated by the delicate balance of nature. He understood the mathematics of survival, the brutal efficiency of the food chain, the way ecosystems maintained themselves through checks and balances that humans often disrupted. Where Emily felt animals with her heart, Jack understood them with his mind. Together, they were complete, each filling the gaps in the other's knowledge and approach. And together, they shared a dream that had consumed them both since they first met in a college zoology class: to experience the wild in its purest form, to bond with an animal in a way most humans never could, to bridge that ancient gap between civilization and the untamed world. It all began on a rainy Thursday afternoon in late autumn when a small, trembling crate arrived at their doorstep from the United Kingdom. The sky was the color of wet concrete, and rain drummed steadily against the pavement, creating rivers in the gutters that carried fallen leaves toward the storm drains. The delivery man, a stocky fellow with a graying beard and nervous eyes, hesitated before handing the crate over, holding it as if it were the most fragile treasure on earth. You know what's in here, right?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Emily nodded, her hands already reaching out, trembling with anticipation and fear in equal measure. Inside, nestled in soft blankets that smelled faintly of hay and something wild and musky, was a golden-eyed lion cub no bigger than a large house cat. His fur was the color of honey in sunlight, soft and downy, with small tufts sticking up around his oversized ears. He looked up at them with a mixture of curiosity and fear, his eyes wide and luminous, letting out a soft, pitiful mew that seemed impossibly small and vulnerable. Those eyes, they would haunt Emily for the rest of her life, filled with such innocent trust and bewilderment. Emily knelt beside the crate, her fingers trembling as she reached in and stroked the cub's coarse fur, feeling the rapid beating of his tiny heart beneath her palm. "He's perfect," she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. The cub leaned into her touch, seeking warmth and comfort, and she felt something shift in her chest, a fierce, maternal protectiveness that she had never experienced before. Jack, ever the cautious one, stood behind her, his analytical mind already racing through the implications. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly. "Are we really ready for this?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "He's a lion. Not a kitten you can leave in the backyard. Not a dog you can train with treats and patience. This is..." He trailed off, unable to articulate the enormity of what they were undertaking. But the moment the cub nuzzled Emily's hand with his wet nose and purred a surprisingly loud, vibrating sound for such a small body, rumbling like a tiny engine, they both knew they were committed. There was no turning back now, no second-guessing, no room for doubt. They named him Kovu, after the adventurous lion in one of their favorite childhood stories, not realizing how prophetic the name would become, how perfectly it would capture the journey that lay ahead. Raising a lion in the heart of the city was nothing short of chaotic, a daily adventure that tested every ounce of their patience, creativity, and resolve. At first, Kovu was tiny enough to be carried around, tucked under their arms like an unusually exotic pet as they walked him through quiet streets in the early morning hours, the soft drizzle dampening his golden fur and making it stick up in adorable tufts. Passersby stopped in their tracks, their morning routines forgotten, mouths agape in disbelief, pulling out phones to take photos and whispering to one another in excited, hushed tones. "Is that a lion?" An elderly man asked one morning, his wrinkled face a mask of incredulity as he adjusted his thick glasses to get a better look. Kovu wriggled in Emily's arms, making small chirping sounds, his tail flicking back and forth with puppy-like enthusiasm. "He's just a baby," Emily explained with a nervous laugh, though she could see the concern in the old man's eyes. The unspoken question, what happens when he's not? In the evenings, as the sun dipped below the skyline and painted their building in shades of amber and rose, they let Kovu play in their small rooftop garden, a cramped space with a few potted plants, a rusted folding chair, and a view of brick walls and fire escapes. They watched him with endless fascination as he pounced on leaves that skittered across the concrete, chased shadows that danced in the fading light, and tumbled with stuffed toys that were far too small for him, batting them around with oversized paws that hinted at the power they would one day possess. Jack, ever the problem solver, built a climbing structure for Kovu out of wooden crates and thick ropes he'd purchased from a marine supply store, creating a miniature jungle gym that Kovu took to immediately. The cub's agility quickly surpassed their expectations. He could leap from platform to platform with breathtaking grace, his muscles rippling beneath his fur, his movements a perfect blend of playfulness and predatory precision. But even in these playful moments, there were glimpses of the wild in his behavior that both thrilled and unnerved them. The sharp focus in his eyes when he spotted a pigeon landing on the railing, the way his ears twitched at sounds they couldn't even hear, the sudden bounding energy that seemed almost impossible to contain within the confines of their small urban sanctuary. As months passed with alarming speed, Kovu grew rapidly, transforming before their eyes like something out of a time-lapse video. His paws became enormous, each step a soft but increasingly heavy thud against the apartment floors that made the dishes rattle in the cupboards. His baby mew deepened into a proper roar that echoed in the narrow streets below, causing car alarms to wail and dogs to bark frantically behind closed doors. Neighbors began to complain politely at first, then with increasing urgency. The landlord, a nervous man with a comb-over and perpetually sweaty palms, knocked on their door one evening, wringing his hands and explaining that while he appreciated their unique situation, he really couldn't have a lion living in his building. Insurance purposes, he stammered, backing away from the door as Kovu's shadow appeared in the hallway. One crisp afternoon in late spring, as cherry blossoms drifted through the air like pink snow, Kovu leaped onto the low fence separating their rooftop garden from the neighbors, clawing at it with frightening strength. The wood splintered under his weight, nails popping free with sharp cracks. Emily watched in horror as the fence shuddered and swayed. He's too big," she said, her voice trembling, the reality of the situation finally crashing down on her like a wave. Jack nodded grimly, his jaw set in that way it did when he was making difficult calculations. "And too strong. We can't keep him here much longer. It's not fair to him, and it's not safe for anyone else." Despite the mounting challenges and the growing sense of inevitability, Emily and Jack cherished every moment they had with Kovu. They taught him tricks, like nudging a ball with his nose or sitting on command, though they knew it was more for their own amusement than any real obedience. Kovu was tolerating them, humoring them, not truly submitting. They marveled at how quickly he learned, how he seemed to understand affection and loyalty in ways that defied his wild nature. He followed them everywhere, his heavy footsteps padding behind them from room to room, curling up at their feet at night with his massive head resting on Emily's leg, purring loudly as though he were a guardian as much as a companion. Sometimes Emily would wake in the middle of the night to find his golden eyes watching her in the darkness, unblinking and ancient, and she would wonder what thoughts moved through that leonine mind. But the city was never going to be enough. They had always known this, even if they'd tried to deny it. One warm evening, As they walked Kovu down a crowded street during the dinner rush, a cyclist swerved violently to avoid Kovu's playful leap toward a fluttering plastic bag, nearly colliding with a lamppost and tumbling over his handlebars in the process. The man picked himself up, cursing, his knee scraped and bleeding. Emily grabbed Kovu's thick mane, her heart racing so fast she thought it might burst through her ribs. "This isn't safe," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For him, or for anyone else." Jack's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "We've given him love," he said quietly, staring at Kovu's magnificent profile as the lion watched pedestrians with amber eyes that held both curiosity and an unmistakable hunger. "But love isn't enough. He's a lion, Emily. He belongs to the wild. He belongs to Africa." Reluctantly, with hearts heavy as stones, they reached out to Dr. Amara Ndavu, a renowned conservationist based in Botswana whose work they had followed for years. She listened patiently as they described Kovu's upbringing over a crackling video call, the time difference making her face appear on their screen in bright African sunlight while they sat in their dim apartment at midnight. They told her about his behaviors, his quirks, the bond they shared, how he recognized their footsteps, how he brought them his toys, how he seemed to smile in his own leonine way. "You've given him love, which is rare for a lion raised outside the wild," Dr. Ndlovu said gently, her accented voice warm but firm. Her face was kind but weathered, lined with years of difficult decisions and hard-won wisdom. "But now, we need to give him freedom in a way that ensures his survival. Love is not enough without the skills he needs. And those skills, they take time, patience, and sacrifice from all of you." With Dr. Ndlovu's guidance, conducted through weekly video calls and detailed written instructions, they began the heartbreaking process of preparing Kovu for a life in Africa. The process was slow, deliberate, and emotionally taxing in ways they hadn't anticipated. They reduced human contact gradually, spending less time cuddling him, resisting his plaintive calls when he wanted attention, teaching themselves to harden their hearts just enough. It felt like betrayal every single time. They rented a larger space outside the city, a property with an enclosed acre of land, and built naturalistic enclosures filled with logs, boulders, and tall grasses. They encouraged Kovu to explore these spaces alone, to spend hours away from them, to sleep outside under the stars instead of at the foot of their bed. They taught him to respond to instinctual cues rather than commands, using prey sounds instead of their voices, letting hunger drive his actions rather than treats and affection. The hardest part was introducing live prey under controlled conditions. They started with small birds, their hearts breaking as Kovu, confused at first, eventually understood what was expected. Then rabbits, released into the enclosure while Emily and Jack watched from behind a chain-link fence, Emily's face buried in Jack's shoulder, unable to watch but unable to look away. Kovu pounced with awkward precision at first, failing repeatedly, the rabbits easily escaping his clumsy attempts. But gradually, painfully, he improved. His movements became more fluid, more calculated, more deadly. "Look at him," Jack said one evening as Kovu finally caught his first rabbit, the successful hunt ending in swift, brutal efficiency. His voice was thick with conflicting emotions, pride and grief intertwined. "He's learning. He'll survive out there." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face, her hands gripping the fence so hard her knuckles turned white. "I know," she whispered, "but I wish I could keep him forever. I wish we could freeze this moment and never have to let go." The day of departure arrived with all the inevitability of a gathering storm, bringing with it a mix of dread and anticipation that made them both feel sick with anxiety. Emily and Jack accompanied Kovu on the long flight to Africa, 23 hours of travel including a layover in London. They had crated him carefully with familiar blankets and toys, whispering reassurances through the wire mesh, their voices hoarse from crying and exhaustion. Kovu's confused eyes watched them throughout the journey, and Emily wondered if he understood, if he felt abandoned, if he would ever forgive them. As the plane touched down on the sprawling African savannah, the wheels kissing the dusty runway with a gentle bump, Emily felt her stomach clench with finality. This was it. This was real. They transported Kovu in a special vehicle to the release site, a protected reserve where Dr. Ndlovu and her team had prepared a soft release enclosure. The African sun beat down with an intensity they'd never experienced, the air thick with unfamiliar scents, dry grass, animal musk, earth baked hard by relentless heat. When they opened the crate, Kovu stepped out slowly, cautiously, his massive paws touching African soil for the first time. He sniffed the warm air, his golden mane now thick and luxurious glinting in the brilliant sunlight. For a long moment, he hesitated, glancing back at Emily and Jack as if to seek reassurance, his eyes asking a question they couldn't answer. Emily wanted to run to him, to wrap her arms around his neck one last time, but she held herself back, knowing that every touch now would only make the separation harder. Then, with a powerful bound that showcased the strength they'd helped nurture, Kovu disappeared into the tall grass, swallowed by the golden waves of the savannah as if he'd always belonged there. The transition was not easy. Dr. Nadevlovu had warned them it wouldn't be, but witnessing it was far harder than any warning could prepare them for. Kovu struggled to catch prey in those first weeks, his city-raised instincts not quite matching the reality of hunting on the open plains. He often returned empty-pawed, frustrated and confused, circling his enclosure with agitated energy. The nights were filled with sounds that terrified him. Hyenas with their eerie laughing calls, distant roars of rival lions, and the countless unfamiliar sounds of wildlife he'd never encountered. Emily and Jack watched from a safe distance, staying in a research camp a few miles away, their hearts aching with every failed hunt, yet they knew that stepping back was essential. Dr. Ndievu reminded them daily, he needs to do this himself. You cannot hunt for him, you cannot protect him. That is not love, that is control. Slowly, painfully, over weeks that stretched into months, Kovu adapted. He learned to stalk with patience, his body low to the ground, moving through the grass like a shadow. He learned to pounce with precision, to read the subtle signs of the savannah, the nervous flick of an impala's ear, the direction of the wind, the best time to strike. The wild, once alien and hostile, became his home. His muscles thickened, his senses sharpened, his roar deepened into something that commanded respect. As months passed and the seasons changed, Kovu grew into a majestic adult, a lion of impressive size and breathtaking confidence. He claimed territory, marking it with scent and sound, encountering rival lions and learning the brutal politics of pride life. Eventually, after many battles and trials, he formed his own pride, attracting lionesses with his strength and bearing. His mane thickened into a magnificent dark crown, and his roar resonated across the plains, a sound of authority and survival, of triumph over impossible odds. Yet, somewhere deep within him, buried beneath layers of instinct and wild experience, the memory of Emily and Jack lingered, a warmth that made his purrs echo with familiarity when he dreamed under the stars. A year later, after endless debates and careful planning, Emily and Jack returned to Africa, unsure if Kovu would recognize them or if they would even be able to find him in the vast expanse of the reserve. They were different, too older somehow, changed by the grief and growth of letting go. Driving through the savannah in an open vehicle with Dr. Ndelevu at the wheel, the golden grass swaying hypnotically in the wind, they scanned the horizon with a mixture of hope and fear. And then, carried on the wind, they heard it, a roar. Strong, deep, commanding, unmistakably Kovu's. And from the distance, a golden figure emerged from the shimmering heat waves, moving with power and grace that took their breath away. This was not the cub they'd raised in their apartment, not the awkward adolescent they'd watched stumble through his first hunts. This was a king. Kovu stopped mid-stride, his eyes, those same golden eyes, locking onto theirs across the distance. Recognition dawned instantly, visible in the way his entire body changed, tension releasing, ears perking forward. He ran, the earth trembling beneath his weight, purring so loudly they could hear it before he reached them. He nuzzled them, rubbed against them with such force he nearly knocked Emily over, marking them as his own, reclaiming them. Tears streamed down Emily's face, her hands buried in his magnificent mane, as Jack laughed through choked sobs, his scientific composure completely abandoned. Kovu had adapted to the wild, had become everything they'd hoped, but he had remembered them. He had not forgotten. Over the following days, Emily and Jack watched Kovu from a respectful distance, marveling at his independence while cherishing the bond they shared. He would come close occasionally, brushing against them with casual affection before disappearing into the wilderness to hunt, to patrol, to live. Observing him with his pride, teaching cubs to stalk, to fight, to survive, being gentle with the young ones in ways that broke and healed their hearts. Simultaneously, they understood with crystalline clarity that love was not possession. True love was freedom, combined with trust and respect, letting go while holding on to what mattered most. Years passed, measured in visits and photographs, in stories shared around campfires. Kovu became a father, then a grandfather, his cubs and their cubs bounding across the savannah under his watchful gaze, carrying his genes and his strength into future generations. Emily and Jack continued to visit, now less frequently as their lives evolved. Emily became a wildlife advocate. Jack wrote books about conservation, but each reunion reminded them of the extraordinary connection between humans and animals, of the possibility of bridging worlds that should have remained forever separate. Kovu's story spread beyond their small circle, shared through Dr. Ndlovu's research papers, through documentaries that Emily and Jack reluctantly participated in, through social media posts that went viral. He became a symbol of love and trust, a living testament to the possibility that animals are capable of deep emotional bonds with humans, that wildness and affection are not mutually exclusive. Even in the untamed expanse of Africa, as he grew old and his mane grayed and his movements slowed, Kovu never forgot the humans who had loved him. And Emily and Jack, though they returned to their city lives in that same brick building with the squeaky stairs, carried the memory of a lion who had changed their lives forever. In his golden eyes lived the wild and the city, the past and the present, the unbreakable bond forged between species, a reminder that love, when combined with respect and the courage to let go, could transcend the boundaries of nature itself. On their last visit, when Kovu was old and his roar had softened to a rumble, he lay in the shade of an acacia tree and let Emily rest her head against his side, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing. Jack sat beside them, his hand on Kovu's massive paw, and none of them said anything because there was nothing left to say. Everything important had already been spoken in the language that exists between souls, in the spaces where words fail but meaning endures. When they left that final time, Kovu watched them go, his eyes following their vehicle until it disappeared into the shimmering distance. And though they never saw him again in life, his legacy lived on in his descendants who ruled the savannah, in the lessons learned about love and letting go, in the proof that sometimes the most profound connections are those we are brave enough to release. Thanks for watching. If Kovu's journey touched your heart, make sure to like and share this video with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories about wildlife and the amazing bonds between humans and animals. And tell us in the comments which part of Kovu's story was your favorite. We can't wait to read your thoughts.